My name is Michael Hansen. I am 43 and live in a quiet Oregon town. The kind that still pretends the world beyond its borders isn't burning. Behind my house stands the only thing I've ever trusted completely, my workshop. A squat timber building lined with old tools, radio static, and the smell of pine that never leaves your clothes. I built it myself over 10 long years. Every plank, every hinge, every nail was placed with a kind of prayerful patience. I don't have children. Never did. People used to ask if I planned to, and I'd always say my tables and cabinets are my legacy. They don't talk back, they don't judge, and they hold their shape. That was enough for me. 5 years ago, I divorced my wife, Clara. We ended quietly, without cruelty or spectacle. Just fatigue. We'd been married 12 years, and somewhere along the way love turned into logistics, bills, groceries, schedules. When she left, the silence she took with her felt like oxygen leaving a room. But I survived it, built my days around the sound of saws and sandpaper, learned to fill loneliness with the rhythm of work. We didn't speak much after the papers were signed. She remarried once, briefly, then divorced again. I knew because this town has a way of whispering about other people's wreckage. I kept to myself. Then, one early autumn evening, my phone rang. It was Clara. Her voice sounded cautious, almost rehearsed. "Hi, Michael. I wouldn't call if it wasn't important." I waited. My sister Nancy moved back to town. They lost their business in Idaho. Her husband's construction company went under. They're staying with her for a while, just until they get back on their feet. Their daughter, Sky, she's 17 now. She's looking for a side job, and I thought maybe. She trailed off like she already knew what I was going to say. "Maybe you could let her help in the shop. Sweep, clean, whatever. You always said young people should learn how to use their hands." I stared at the workbench in front of me. A half-finished cabinet, grain glowing gold under the light. The idea of another person, especially a teenager, invading that space made my stomach tighten. "Clara, this isn't a playground. I don't want to be responsible for someone else's kid." "She's not just anyone's kid," Clara said softly. "She's family." That word family carried a sting. It reminded me of every dinner table where I'd sat beside her sons, trying to be seen, trying to earn a place that was already reserved for someone else. "I don't know," I said. "I work better alone." "I know you do," she said. "But maybe this could be good for you. She's had a rough year. Needs direction." Direction. The word lingered like smoke. Maybe that was why I agreed, because somewhere deep down, I still wanted to believe that structure could save people. That a workshop could teach discipline where life had failed. So I said yes. The next morning, I cleaned the space like I was preparing for company I didn't really want. Moved the stacks of lumber, wiped down the table saws, emptied the bins. The smell of oil and varnish hung thick in the air, and for a moment I felt almost proud. The place looked alive again. When Sky arrived that Saturday, she stepped out of her mother's car wearing white sneakers and a denim jacket that looked more decorative than practical. Her hair was streaked blonde, her phone already raised in one hand. She looked at the shop with a kind of detached amusement. "Wow," she said. "It's like vintage." "It's wood," I replied. "Not a museum." She laughed, assuming it was a joke. It wasn't. I showed her around, where the tools were, where not to step, how to keep her hair tied back near machinery. She nodded through most of it, distracted, thumbs moving across her screen. I told myself to be patient. That first day went better than expected. She swept the floors, stacked boards, asked the occasional question about the types of wood I used. Oak, cherry, maple. She seemed genuinely interested. For a while, I caught myself thinking maybe Clara was right. Maybe the girl just needed structure. But late in the afternoon, while I was sanding down a table leg, I looked up and saw her standing by the window, holding her phone high. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Lighting's great in here," she said, smiling. "Just a quick video." "This isn't a filming studio," I told her. "Put the phone away." She did, slowly, with that casual indifference only teenagers can manage. I let it go. The next day, she was back. Same outfit, same perfume, something sugary that didn't belong in a place like mine. I gave her a list of tasks and went back to work. For an hour, everything was quiet. Then I heard laughter. Not joyful laughter, performative, staged. When I turned, she was dancing in front of her phone, balancing it on a paint can, music blaring softly from the speaker. I waited until the song ended. "You come here to work or to perform?" I asked. She smiled, brushing her hair from her face. "Can't it be both?" The arrogance stung, but I didn't answer. I just pointed to the broom. She rolled her eyes but obeyed. That evening, after she left, I sat alone in the workshop listening to the faint echo of her music in the walls. It felt like contamination, a foreign sound inside something sacred. I poured a drink and stood by the window until the light drained from the sky. When you spend enough years alone, you learn to notice small shifts, the way a space resists intrusion. My workshop had always been a refuge, a kind of chapel built from stubbornness and quiet labor. Now, every footprint, every laugh she left behind, seemed to weaken it. Still, I didn't tell Clara. I didn't want to hear her say, "I told you so," or worse, give her time. On the third day, Sky asked if she could document the woodworking process. She said it would be good content. I told her no firmly. She pouted, said I was old school, and spent the rest of the day sweeping in silence. But later, when I went inside to take a call, I glanced out the kitchen window and saw her standing in the doorway of the shop, phone raised again, spinning slowly like she was capturing the place for her audience. I almost went out there to stop her, but something held me back. A strange, tired resignation. Maybe this was what the world had become. Noise, attention, endless recording. Maybe my kind of silence was already extinct. That night, lying in bed, I thought about Clara's voice on the phone, about how easily she'd said, "She needs direction," as if direction was something you could hand out like a map. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, and wondered why I'd agreed, why I'd let the past back into a life that had finally learned to breathe without it. In the morning, I walked out to the workshop before dawn. The air was cold, heavy with fog. I touched the rough surface of the new table I'd been working on, a gift for a client who still believed in craftsmanship. The grain shimmered under the lamplight like water. For a moment, everything was still again. But beneath that peace, something uneasy was forming. A quiet premonition that the favor I'd done for Clara wasn't a favor at all. It was a debt. And debts, I've learned, always come due. At first, things went better than I expected. Sky showed up on time, wearing safety goggles and the same perfume that smelled faintly of synthetic fruit. She swept the floor, labeled the lumber piles, even asked real questions about grain and weight. For a few days, the silence between us felt productive, the kind of silence that means two people are working toward something instead of running from it. She liked the machines, said the planer sounded like a beast waking up. I almost smiled at that. There was an edge of curiosity in her voice that reminded me of the apprentices I used to take on. Young men with calloused hands and hungry eyes. But Sky wasn't hungry. She was restless. Her attention burned fast, like kindling that never becomes a steady flame. The first time she asked if she could take a photo for her page, I said no. She laughed, thought I was joking. "It's just social media," she said. "I'm helping promote you." "I don't need promotion," I replied. "I need focus." She shrugged, turned away. I heard the click of her phone anyway, quick and secretive. I didn't stop her. That was my first mistake. By the second week, the workshop had changed. It wasn't a place of patience anymore. It was a backdrop. She'd angle her phone against toolboxes, pose beside unfinished tables, tilt her head toward the sunlight bleeding through the windows. Her captions, I'd later learn, said things like, "Helping out in this dusty old man cave, #grind #vibes. When she wasn't filming, she hummed to herself. Songs I didn't know, songs that didn't belong to the rhythm of sandpaper and sawdust. I told her more than once that distraction could get her hurt. She'd nod, agree, promise to focus. Then the next day, the phone would be out again, glowing like a wound in her hand. One afternoon, while cutting walnut for a dining set, I caught her watching me through the camera lens. Not watching, recording. Sky, I said. What are you doing? She smiled. People love process videos. It's like, satisfying, you know? Turn it off, I said. This isn't entertainment. She sighed dramatically, pocketed the phone, and muttered, You're so paranoid. Maybe I was. Or maybe I just lived long enough to know that the world outside that small workshop doesn't forgive men my age when teenage girls decide to play with reputation. That night I called Clara, told her Sky was spending more time filming than working. Clara chuckled, said, That's just how kids are. She means no harm. No harm. I hung up before I said something cruel. By the third week, Sky had built a following. I didn't know it at first. I don't use those apps. But she told me proudly one morning, waving her phone in my face. See? Look, people love the grumpy craftsman thing. They think you're like a mentor figure. I didn't know whether to laugh or walk out. You're turning my livelihood into a joke. It's exposure, she said. I looked around the room, the benches, the shelves, the tools I'd repaired 100 times, and thought exposure is what ruins wood. That day I banned the phone. No more filming, no more photos. She nodded, wide-eyed, pretending to agree. But I saw the way her fingers twitched, like an addict separated from her fix. For a few days, peace returned. The saw sang again. The radio hummed quietly. The light fell through the windows like forgiveness. I started to believe maybe she'd understood. Then came the delivery day. A client had ordered a cabinet cherry wood, hand-carved panels, ornate latticework. I'd spent months on it, tracing every line until it felt like a living thing. It stood in the center of the workshop, gleaming under the varnish, waiting to be delivered. That afternoon, I stepped outside to meet the truck driver. We exchanged paperwork, small talk about the weather. I was gone for maybe 10 minutes. When I came back, the air was wrong. I smelled lacquer. Not the sweet, steady scent of drying finish, but the sharp burn of spillage. The bench was overturned. The cabinet lay in pieces. Its carved door cracked down the center like a broken rib. A sea of liquid amber spread across the floor, thick and shining. And in the middle of it stood Sky, laughing into her phone. Breaking free from boring jobs challenge, she shouted. For a second, I couldn't move. I just stood there, trying to understand if what I was seeing was real. When she noticed me, her laughter died mid-breath. It's just for fun, she stammered, lowering the phone. I didn't shout. I didn't curse. I just took out my own phone, pressed record, and filmed the ruin. The lacquer soaking into the floorboards, the shattered cabinet, the girl frozen in guilt. Why are you recording? She asked, voice trembling. Because I want proof, I said quietly. This is what you call fun. She tried to apologize then, words tumbling out too fast to mean anything. I didn't listen. The workshop smelled like death. The kind that doesn't bleed but still K*LS something sacred. I told her to leave. She hesitated. Please, don't tell my mom. Go, I said. Now. She ran. For hours, I stayed there, staring at the wreckage. The cabinet had taken me nearly 6 months. 6 months of late nights, careful cuts, hours bent over in silence. I traced the cracked panel with my finger, feeling the splintered grain, and thought of all the things in life that shatter in seconds after years of care. When I finally went inside, the sun had already died. I sat at the kitchen table, phone in hand, replaying the short clip I'd recorded. The image trembled slightly. My hands had been shaking, but the evidence was clear. The next morning, I sent the video and photos to Clara. She didn't call right away. When she finally did, her voice was panicked, breathless. Michael, please, it was an accident. She didn't mean to. She was filming a challenge, I said. An accident requires intent to do something right. This was the opposite. Don't do anything rash, she pleaded. She's just a kid. She's 17, old enough to understand destruction. There was silence on the line. Then a soft, desperate whisper. We'll pay you back. Just don't make this public. I didn't answer. My workshop was unrecognizable, a battlefield of wasted beauty. That night, I sat alone in the dark, replaying the scene again and again in my mind. The way she laughed before realizing I was there. The ease with which she turned work into spectacle. I thought about what Clara had said. She just needs direction. Maybe the problem wasn't direction. Maybe it was consequence. The next morning, I opened my laptop and filed a report. Property damage. $18,000 in materials and labor lost. Evidence attached. When I pressed submit, I felt something inside me settle. Not relief, just clarity. I'd spent years forgiving things that didn't deserve forgiveness. Maybe it was time to stop sanding down the rough edges of other people's choices. The girl wanted a stage. Now she'd have one in court. When I filed the report, I expected silence. Maybe denial. Maybe a wall of excuses. But I didn't expect the wave of outrage that followed. Within days, Clara called again. Her voice shaking with that mixture of guilt and pleading I remembered too well. Michael, please. You can't do this to her. She's terrified. She didn't know what she was doing. I said nothing. She's 17, she continued. You remember what it's like to be that age. No, I interrupted. At 17, I was holding a job and paying rent. I wasn't destroying someone's livelihood for followers. She went quiet. Behind her, I could hear Sky crying, the sound faint but deliberate, like a soundtrack meant to sway pity. I'll cover the costs, Clara said finally. We'll pay you back. It's $18,000, Clara. You can't cover that. And it's not just money. It's principle. Principle. Her voice cracked into something sharp. You're going to drag a child to court over principle? Yes, I said, because you didn't teach her any. The line went dead. The next few weeks blurred into paperwork, phone calls, and the slow machinery of justice. The county clerk's office smelled of disinfectant and resignation. The officers were polite, detached. They'd seen it all before. Broken property, broken families, broken excuses. Sky was charged with criminal mischief. A misdemeanor, but serious enough to leave a mark. The court date came fast. Faster than I expected. The irony landed like a cruel joke. The hearing was scheduled for the morning of her 18th birthday. When I found out, I sat at my desk for a long time, staring at the notice. Felt like fate had a sense of humor after all. Word spread through the family like wildfire. Nancy called, her voice trembling with polite venom. You're really doing this? Against a child? Against destruction, I said. Clara's mother left a message I didn't return. Even my brother, who'd always told me to stand my ground, asked, You sure this is worth the fallout? It wasn't about worth anymore. It was about boundaries. The morning of the hearing, the courthouse parking lot was soaked in rain. I sat in my truck watching the wipers smear gray light across the windshield. In another life, I might have turned the key and driven home. But something in me had hardened since the day she broke my cabinet. I wasn't angry anymore. I was certain. Inside, the courtroom was small, linoleum floors, fluorescent lights, the faint buzz of an old ceiling vent. Sky sat at the defendant's table beside a public defender who looked barely older than she was. Clara and Nancy sat behind her. Their faces were drawn tight, pale with embarrassment. When the judge entered, everyone stood. His robe looked too large, his expression weary. The kind of man who's seen too many small tragedies dressed up as misunderstandings. The clerk read the charges. Property damage, intentional mischief, restitution of $18,400. The judge looked at me. Mr. Hansen, you have evidence? I handed him the printed photographs, the broken cabinet, the spilled lacquer, the frame captures from the video. He studied them for a long time, sighing through his nose. Then he turned to Sky. Miss Moore, do you deny this? She shifted in her seat, eyes glistening. It was a joke. I didn't mean to ruin anything. The judge raised an eyebrow. A joke worth $18,000? Her lawyer intervened, talking about youth, social media pressure, mental health. I tuned it out. I watched Sky instead. How she wiped tears that never quite fell. How Clara leaned forward like she could shield her from consequence. When it was my turn to speak, I stood slowly. Your Honor, I've spent my life building things that last. What she broke wasn't just wood. It was months of work, yes, but more than that, it was respect. Every board, every coat of varnish is time you don't get back. And when someone laughs while they destroy it, that's not youth. That's arrogance. The courtroom was silent. Only the hum of the vent filled the air. The judge nodded. Noted. When he read the verdict, his voice was steady. Restitution in full, probation for 1 year, community service. Case closed. It wasn't victory I felt, just quiet inevitability. As the gavel fell, Sky burst into tears. Clara reached for her hand, whispering something I couldn't hear. I turned and walked out before the apologies started. Outside, the rain had stopped. The sky was bruised purple, the kind that looks like it's holding its breath before night. I stood by my truck for a long time, watching the courthouse doors. When Clara finally emerged, she came straight toward me. "Are you proud of yourself?" she asked. "No," I said. "Just done." "She's a child, Michael. She's an adult as of today. That's what birthdays mean." Her jaw trembled. "You ruined her 18th birthday." I almost laughed. "She ruined mine 5 years ago when she called me boring in front of your entire family. I'm just catching up." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "You've changed." "No," I said. "I finally stopped pretending." I got into the truck. She knocked on the window, still talking, still pleading. I rolled it down just enough to say, "You wanted her to learn responsibility. Consider this her first lesson." Then I drove away. The town blurred past. Gray buildings, dripping awnings, the ordinary rhythm of people who didn't know a small war had been fought inside a courthouse. When I reached my street, I parked outside the workshop. The lights were off inside, but even in the dark I could see the faint outline of the repaired cabinet, the one I'd rebuilt piece by piece after she broke it. I walked in, turned on the lamp, and ran my hand across its surface. Smooth again, whole again, but changed. That's the thing about repair. You can hide the cracks, but you can't erase the break. Later that night, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "You didn't have to destroy her life. She's just a kid." I didn't reply. Instead, I opened the door to the workshop, stepped outside, and let the cold air fill my lungs. Somewhere in town, a girl was blowing out candles on a cake, crying between flashes of phone cameras. A new legal adult learning that actions echo louder than apologies. And for the first time in years, I slept without dreaming. After the verdict, the noise died down, slowly, like the echo of a hammer striking metal. For a week, I heard nothing. No calls, no visits, no gossip. Just quiet. But quiet in small towns is never peace. It's the space before judgment takes its final shape. By the second week, the whispers began. At the grocery store, the clerk's smile turned cautious. At the diner, 2 old men I'd known for years stopped mid-conversation when I walked in. Even at church, where people pretend forgiveness is their native language, eyes followed me down the aisle like I'd carried something contagious. They said I'd ruined a young girl's future, that I'd taken things too far, that I could have handled it privately. But none of them had seen the video. They hadn't heard the laughter, the deliberate joy in destruction. They just wanted a villain, and I was convenient, the older man, alone, disciplined, humorless. In the story they told, Sky was the careless dreamer, and I was the bitter craftsman who couldn't bear to be mocked. I didn't correct them. Clara didn't call again, though once I saw her car parked at the edge of my driveway, engine idling, before reversing and disappearing down the road. Maybe she'd meant to apologize. Maybe she just wanted to make sure I was still alive. I was, more than ever. The restitution payments started arriving a month later. Small, regular deposits from a joint account that probably wasn't hers alone. $18,400 spread over the course of a year. A slow, grinding reminder that every act of carelessness carries a bill. I didn't touch the money. I kept it in a separate account, labeled Reclaim Time. Not for spite, but for clarity. Sky found a job at a cafe on the edge of town. I learned this through whispers too, the kind of information people offer with half pity, half accusation. Someone said she was saving up for college. Someone else said she'd dropped out. The details shifted, but one thing stayed the same. They all blamed me for whatever happened next. The internet helped her case. That's the strange mercy of the age we live in. Ruin can be romantic if it's edited right. A few of her friends posted about an unfair system, about older men targeting young creators. They didn't name me directly, but they didn't need to. Small towns have long memories and short imaginations. I stopped going out much. Not out of shame. I've carried worse. But because solitude had always been my truest ally. The workshop became my refuge again. Sealed against noise and misunderstanding. I repaired what could be repaired. The floorboards still bore the faint amber stain of spilled lacquer, but I didn't sand it out. I left it there as a warning. A reminder that trust, once broken, leaves its scent forever. One evening, as I locked up, I found an envelope wedged under the door. Inside was a note written in hurried penmanship. I'm sorry. I didn't know what it cost. I just wanted people to notice me. No name, but I recognized the handwriting, large, uncertain, like someone used to sincerity. I read it once, folded it carefully, and placed it on the shelf beside my chisels. Then I turned off the lights and left it in the dark. Apologies are easy. Repair takes more than ink. Months passed. The seasons shifted. The maple outside the shop turned from green to rust to bare gray. The payments kept coming. The whispers quieted. People found new stories to dissect, new scandals, new villains. That's how communities survive their own boredom. Every morning I brewed coffee, opened the workshop, and worked until the light changed. The rhythm saved me: measure, cut, sand, repeat. Creation as repentance, craft as prayer. Sometimes, when I was bent over a piece of oak, I'd think of sky. Not with anger, not anymore. With a strange kind of pity. I wondered what it must be like to live in a world where nothing feels real unless someone else is watching. Where the measure of your worth is the number of eyes staring back. In a way, she and I weren't so different. I built to be remembered. She performed to be seen. Both of us chasing permanence in different languages. Still, I couldn't forgive her. Not entirely. Forgiveness without understanding is just forgetting, and forgetting is how damage repeats itself. In late spring, I delivered a new commission. A dining table for a couple who just moved up from Portland. They wanted something handmade, authentic. Those words always taste false in a client's mouth, but I built it anyway. When they came to pick it up, they walked through the workshop like tourists, pointing at tools, smiling at the smell of oil and cedar. Beautiful space, the husband said. You ever think of hiring apprentices? Passing on the craft. I almost laughed. Tried that once. He didn't press. They paid in full and left, their laughter fading down the driveway. After they were gone, I sat on the workbench and watched the evening settle over the yard. The air was thick with sawdust and silence. The sign above the door, the one I'd carved after rebuilding the shop, caught the last streak of sunlight. It read, "This is not a filming space. This is where people work with their hands." I hadn't planned those words. They'd come to me the night after the hearing, carved into the wood like a final line in a confession. That night, I locked up early. As I walked toward the house, I noticed the faint glow of a phone screen in the trees near the edge of the property. Someone filming again, maybe teenagers passing by. I didn't shout. I didn't move closer. I just turned off the porch light and let the darkness swallow the frame. Inside, the quiet was thick but clean. I poured a drink, sat by the window, and watched the workshop through the glass. The lamp inside glowed faintly, illuminating the dust drifting in the air. It looked almost holy. People say time heals. It doesn't. It only teaches you how to live with the scar. Clara called once more in late summer. Her voice was hesitant, older somehow. She finished her probation, she said. She's starting community college next year. That's good, I said. She wanted me to thank you. I smiled, though she couldn't see it. Tell her she earned that on her own. Before she hung up, she said, "Do you ever regret it?" I looked out at the workshop, the sign above the door, the faint outline of the stained floorboards still visible through the open window. "No," I said. I regret how long I waited to draw the line. After she hung up, I sat for a while, listening to the night settle around the house. Somewhere in the distance, a train passed, low and mournful, its echo fading into the hills. I thought about Sky, about Clara, about all the versions of myself I'd been, the patient man, the silent man, the forgiving man. Each one had been built like my tables. Precise, durable, doomed to be scratched by time. Now there was only this version. The man who finally understood that kindness without boundaries is just another form of self-destruction. The clock ticked softly. The drink went warm in my hand. When people ask about the sign above my door, I tell them it's just a reminder for safety. But that's not the truth. The truth is simpler. It's a warning. Because sometimes, when I'm alone in the workshop, I still hear it. The ghost of laughter, the echo of a phone recording what it should have respected. And in those moments, I whisper the same question to myself, quiet, certain, final. Was I wrong? Or did I simply stop letting the world break what I built?